Welcome to the How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. This is how to succeed at creating demand. The following podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems Inc. and protected by U.S. copyright laws. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. You can find more information at sandler.com. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, go ahead and do that now. I'm your host, Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler, and my guest this week is Christopher Roche. He's CEO of Catalyst Consulting. You can find them at catalystconsulting.services. We're going to talk with him about how to succeed at creating demand. Christopher, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a little bit about creating demand. What does that mean? How is that different from other marketing services like creating leads or generating revenue? What are we talking about here today?
Yep. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to diving into this topic with you. As I'm sure you've seen by previous podcasts that I've been on or just content, this is something that it's a hot topic right now. Basically, the typical marketing approach that a lot of companies, especially B2B companies, are really leveraging at the moment is lead generation, which is basically putting out some kind of marketing content, ebook, white paper download, signing up for a webinar in exchange for contact information. Once somebody submits the contact information, it gets passed to an SDR, it gets passed to a sales rep, and they basically go and try and nurture that prospect through the pipeline to where they eventually become closed won. The issue with that, and where I personally see a lot of animosity between sales and marketing, is that the leads that come in aren't qualified. They're too early on in the pipeline, and therefore sales is spending a lot of time following up with these prospects that just aren't interested in buying, and therefore that leads to ultimately frustration, through the marketing and opportunities that are being created. So the way demand generation differs from that is we very much focus on how can we educate your target market at scale over the course of 3, 6, even as much as 12, 18 months, to the point of when they do enter that buying mode, they are solution aware, they're product aware, they can reach out to your company, reach out to an account executive, submit, requests for contact information, requests for a demo, and they are further through that, theoretical sales pipeline before they ever come into the CRM of that particular company. And that ultimately leads to lower customer acquisition costs and basically higher conversion rates from lead in to close won.
I love that. It brings up a couple of things to mind first, right off the bat. I think in marketing terms, we kind of think of top of the funnel content, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. A lot of what you're saying here is people are focusing too much on the bottom of the funnel stuff. They're trying to get stuff passed over to sales. They're trying to collect names and maybe not spending enough attention as top of the funnel. How are we finding strangers and making them aware of what we do in a way that creates some demand and people into this top of the funnel? I'm really excited to talk with you today, but it also reminded me of a Sandler rule that I think people mess up a lot. We have a rule for our sales teams of sell today, educate tomorrow, which is if you're in a sales call and you have a hot lead in front of you, your job is not to teach them how to solve the problem so they don't need you. Your job is to close the business, then turn it over to the customer success team. They can educate them. We can onboard them about all of the stuff that they need to know, but you really need to be laser focused on that client's needs and having the conversation, getting them what they need to make a decision, not to teach them everything that you know about whatever your product or service is. That rule is often messed up though in our world from marketers. Marketers, I think it's the opposite, right? You want to educate today so that you can sell tomorrow. Do you agree with that sentiment? And what are we talking about really in that sort of education range?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I have a background in sales. I've been a chief revenue officer. I've started my career as in outbound sales, knocking on doors, businesses, throughout the Milwaukee area. So I understand it from both sides. When you have a sales, when you're in a sales position, if you have a lead in front of you that is ready to close, you got to close that. You've got to go for the kill. And like you say, focus on the education of how to use the product afterwards, how to apply this to the current situation, because that prospect, they have a problem. You have a solution that can solve that for them. So go for the kill and get that close. That's a different scenario than what we're talking about here with marketing, which is there are only so many people in your market at any given point who are ready to buy today. They're in a buying mode. And when we're talking about large, ACVs, annual contract values of $20,000, $30,000 plus, there isn't that quick sales cycle associated where you can just, it's not an instant buy. People aren't coming in and just buying within 7 days of seeing an ad. It's about how can we educate the entire market at scale through LinkedIn ads, through Facebook ads, through Instagram ads, through Google advertisements. How can we get in front of our potential buyers over a longer time period so that when they do get to the point where they are sizing up potential opportunities for the problem that they have, or they've identified that they have a problem and they're now actively searching for a solution, your product is top of mind so that, again, you can go for that kill and go for that close one. So it's not about necessarily choosing to educate after you've closed the deal. You're never going to close a deal if somebody doesn't identify that they have a problem and they're looking for a solution. However, how can we focus on making sure that we are top of mind for when they do realize that, not necessarily just trying to get them into our CRM so our sales team can harass them? Because as a sales rep, you don't want to be calling people that don't want to answer the phone. You don't want to call people that don't want to hear from you. It's demoralizing. That's not a position that you want to put yourself into. And that's that caveat that marketing and sales has right now, where sales needs more leads. Marketing is trying to increase the quality, and it's not a system that is really working particularly well with this lead generation, in today's world.
Love it. Now I think we got it set up. We can jump into the good stuff. What is the ideal attitude for marketers to have here, especially when we're trying to attract strangers? And I think a lot of people, especially with social media these days, miss the fact that getting to new people is different than preaching to your choir and your fans and followers. And so a lot of times we fool ourselves of like, oh, we got great engagement of those posts, but a lot of time that engagement is from people who are already buying from us. What's the ideal attitude to get strangers with demand gen, or demand gen?
Yeah, I mean, with demand gen, first and foremost, you have to have a long-term goal with this. It is a long-term investment. The way that I set up with new clients and the way that we implement these techniques is, first and foremost, we go for the easy wins. You go for the low-hanging fruit, because like I've said, there are always going to be so many people in your market who are actively looking for a solution that aren't product aware, and they are solution aware. They're just not brand or product aware. So how can we get those into our CRM? That's what we call the demand capture sites. That's going to be your Google ads, your Bing ads, very much high intent, people who are visiting the website, retargeting. How can we get people into our pipeline who are ready to buy? But there's only ever going to be a set finite number of those. Typically, it's somewhere around 1 to 2% of your entire market. So the other 98% of your market, how are you starting to get in front of them? Again, they're not going to be following you on Facebook. They're not going to follow your LinkedIn profile. You're probably not already connected with them as a sales leader. So that's where running these paid cold traffic social advertisements is going to allow you to get in front of them over a consistent basis, to be able to have frequencies where every person is seeing an ad from you every 2, 3, 4 times a week, to the point that they start to understand, they start to engage with that content, and then we can start to move them through that funnel. So it's a different approach than just necessarily trying to go with everyone that's in your network and try and close as many people as possible. It's about focusing on who is not ready to buy today, but will be ready in 12 months, so we can start to build that relationship with them, leveraging paid social.
Are there any other common myths or misconceptions about this as far as attitude goes? I feel like tracking is the hard part. I've heard some really good marketers say you kind of have to divide your budget. Half of it, you're basically going to waste and not try to measure in this brand awareness thing, because you're reaching people that are not going to convert here immediately, or they're not immediately trackable. And I think even what you said there on the pay-per-click ads, I feel like once people start measuring it, they start measuring for the wrong things. They start measuring for the clicks and the engagements, and not the number of like new leads that we're creating. How would you feel like we should get our heads around this when trying to reach strangers? Yeah,
there's a ton of misconception with which metrics to measure when you're running demand generation campaigns. Very early on, cold traffic, really just raising that awareness. For me, the metric I tie everything to is revenue. So that's really, how are we influencing revenue? As a marketer with a sales background, I don't care what the cost per click is, as long as that's a profitable customer acquisition cost. And that's the way we work with clients, is that we're very much focused on revenue. We are a pipeline and revenue growth focused marketing agency. We're not going to write, blog post for you. We're not going to post on Instagram for you. We're going to make sure that our advertisement is ultimately driving an ROI for you. The best way to track that, and the issue that you have as a marketer or as a sales right now, is the fact that the attribution tracking is not there because of the fact that you can't track across platform, you can't track across device. There are a lot more difficulties with being able to understand where that opportunity came from. So what we've started actually basically putting with all of our clients now is this self-reported attribution. So when somebody comes into the pipeline, when somebody submits a contact form or request information form or tries to book a call with an account executive, we simply have a, how did you hear about us? Let them tell you, and leave it as a free text, and let them tell you where they heard about you, because it may be from being on this podcast. Somebody comes into my website and says, oh, I saw you on that podcast. I listened to the podcast. I'm interested in learning more about marketing. It may be that they saw my TikTok videos, my LinkedIn videos, you name it. You'll start to understand, out of all of the marketing initiatives that you're doing, where you're not focused on how many clicks does it get, what's the consumption rate right off the bat, as you start to build that into a more sophisticated campaign, which is driving qualified leads, and then out of those channels, which has the highest conversion, ultimately the lowest customer acquisition cost based on how much you're spending. Once you figure that out, then you can double down on what's working and ultimately increase those channels. So it's not as difficult as I think a lot of marketers make it out to be. However, it's a tremendous amount of work to get to the point of manual work, basically tracking it back to those individual campaigns. And that's where a lot of marketers just throw their hands in the air and say, we can't track this. The fact is, you can if you put the work in, but you have to be willing to do that and ultimately use revenue as your North Star, not the average cost per click or the CPM, which for me and my clients, it doesn't matter. The CPM could double as long as the customer acquisition cost stays the same. I don't care. That's kind of the way we're looking at it.
I like that. And I think it sets up a discussion around channel, because you mentioned a few of those. Normally on this show, we're dealing with salespeople. And so we're looking at sort of the most profitable channels for them to spend their time individually, which is like, referrals, warm introductions and stuff where you're going to have a high probability of close. But I feel like in demand gen, this is, again, the different side of the coin, where we may need to get on channels we're not at, or find our audience in places where we're looking for new eyeballs that we're not necessarily aware of them. And we don't really know, maybe initially, what those quality of leads are going to, that conversion percentage is going to be. What are you recommending these days, or is there any specific channels? Like you mentioned LinkedIn, TikTok. I'm thinking also ones I love are where I'm creating content in places where there are large groups of people. I like to kind of fish with nets instead of poles. So I'm looking at, like, how can I get a article published in a magazine that all of my buyers read, or how can I get a podcast where my potential listeners listen to that? What would you recommend as far as channels go?
Yeah, the best platform or the best channel that you should be marketing on is the channel, the platform where your intended audience spends time. And that's the simplest way of putting it. If your buyer is on LinkedIn, spend time on LinkedIn. If your buyer is going to these conventions and reading these magazines, or is spending time on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or whatever that is, wherever your buyer is, meet them on that platform, and then focus the content in being almost an organic feel so it can be consumed within platform. The last thing you want to do is try and run LinkedIn ads and take the ad to a landing page to do a conversion of downloads, an ebook to be able to get that contact information and then ultimately provide that value. If you can focus on getting in front of your buyer on a consistent basis, depending on that channel as to where their audience is, that's how you can really drive demand for your product. Now, for most B2B sellers, LinkedIn is by far the most successful platform for getting in front of them, purely because your buyers are there. The level of targeting is very, very sophisticated to be able to go after very specific ICPs. And from there, we can see the engagements. We can look on who's engaging with the post. We can look at the consumption rates, how many people have watched 100% of that. And we can see those demographics of the job titles and the companies. So we know when we're running a campaign to the right people. You don't have that same level of targeting on other platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. They are good platforms to be able to, in my opinion, run the secondary level of ads. That's where I'm looking at really retargeting ads. That's where we're looking at taking it from website visitors, looking at taking it from lookalike audiences. We can test those. But for me, in terms of social platforms, LinkedIn, for my clients, drives the most results. But that's because we're selling to people who are on LinkedIn. And if they're not there, you need to figure out where they are and use that channel instead.
Good. Sounds like we're getting a little bit deeper here. I want to give you a tough question and see where you land on this. In my world, obviously, I love content marketing because I'm making stuff that can be evergreen and can last for a long time. Like we've been doing this podcast for 7 years. You can still go listen to the first episode I did with our CEO. Blogs, newsletters, videos on YouTube that can live forever. But I think you also have to spend a certain proportion of your budget, like you mentioned, on these ads and things that are more ephemeral. So, LinkedIn's only going to show that post while you're boosting it, or it's going to be a short-term kind of awareness campaign there to reach new eyeballs. And I do think it pays to do that because, they're not going to organically find your stuff. Sometimes you got to reach out, just like salespeople would. If the person's not going to call you, you better call them, right? What do you think that balance is? Is it 50-50 with your budget and time? Is it 70-30? Where do you fall on, the paid promotions, short-term stuff, social media versus cornerstone content and things that would live on for a long time?
It depends how quickly you want to sell, really. If you're looking at selling over 7 years, then I would say, yeah, start a podcast and it's going to attract people over the next 5 to 7 years. If you want results tomorrow, leverage paid social. So it depends how quickly you want the results. For me, the beauty of paid social, and I have quite a unique opinion on paid social versus organic, in the fact that we'll look at organic posts and we'll look at what's been performing well, whether that's been podcast episodes, whether that's been interviews with clients, whether that's been case studies, and we'll actually leverage those as paid social campaigns, and we'll run them across our entire audience, because we've seen that with our small following that we've had success with getting inbound requests from that. So now we're going to take that piece of content and we're going to blast that out across our market. So I look at paid social as a way to guarantee the delivery of your content effectively. And you can pay basically to be in front of the eyeballs of who your audience is. You're basically paying for the placement there. Social organic is great because in theory, it's free. Yes, there's a cost of producing it. There is more of an authentic buy-in when people follow your account, when they engage with them. They are more likely to convert if they're engaging with you. And that's where, as a sales individual, one of the things that I'm preaching quite a lot with my clients, and specifically when I work with their sales teams, is you need to be on LinkedIn, producing content, connecting with your ICP. You can create your own demand as a sales rep by getting on there and being able to engage with your potential buyer by starting podcasts, by producing video content. And you'd be amazed at the initial pushback, because a lot of the, I think, imposter syndrome, I think a lot of individuals, when they talk about posting on LinkedIn, it's scary. They don't want to produce a video. Start with text post then. Start with something simple, get that low hanging fruit, do something that's repeatable and scalable so you can start to see success with that. And then as you get more and more comfortable, then go and produce videos, then go and be guests on podcasts, then start your own podcast, then start your own TikTok. You can start to produce this content, and that will ultimately attract people to you. And I can tell you this firsthand because that's how I've grown Catalyst. We've never spent $1 on marketing. We've scaled, consistently year over year with this. We've had a lot of success with that, and we've never spent $1 on marketing. All we've done is produce content around marketing. So as a sales leader, that to me is a tremendous opportunity right now that a lot of sales reps struggle to have the push to do, or even the awareness of that it's even a possibility and how to execute on that.
I think that's great. And that's kind of the last question I wanted to ask you here is the how. I'm sure you have a bunch of tips, tricks, and hacks for us. I feel like these change all the time. So maybe we could go with some more tried and true stuff. But I also wanted to circle back to kind of top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, because we mentioned a lot. And I think if you're a novice or a small business, it can get very complicated if you don't have a team. We've already talked about, I could feel somebody getting overwhelmed there, like, all right, well, I got social media. I also have to guest on these podcasts. And I also have to run my business and things too. So where would you maybe recommend that people start, and then maybe highlight one of each? If I was going to do it, I was thinking the paid social, boosting a post to get to people who have never heard of you before is probably a decent place to start. In the middle of the funnel, probably getting those people to sign up for an email marketing list so you can do some sort of dripping of content on them over time, because they're not going to be ready on day one. And then bottom of the funnel, we've mentioned some of those trigger events like a webinar, a white paper download, or something that says, I'm ready now. I think if you have those kind of 3 things set up, that's a pretty good funnel to keep people moving. But I want to know what your thoughts are, what's working for you, and maybe what you would recommend for our listeners.
Yeah, we don't focus on necessarily top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel as directly of that as, how can we get in front of people? How can we get eyeballs? Then how can we get them to, request contact information by downloading a white paper? That, to me, that leads more into that lead gen model. What we're focused on is if we can take a market. So if we're selling to, B2B SaaS companies, let's size up that market. Let's say it's 100,000, CEOs of companies that we can target. How can we produce content on a weekly, monthly basis that we can push out in front of them, leveraging paid social on a consistent basis so that they are seeing fresh content every single couple of weeks? And for them, that's the same as them following our account. Instead of us producing content on our organic. So for us on like Catalyst's LinkedIn profile, go to Catalyst profile. I think we posted once, maybe. It's just not of interest. We don't see the reach with it. We don't see the engagement. It's not something that we've ever really wanted to go after. Whereas I personally, I have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. Every time I post, I'm getting inbound requests, I'm getting conversations. And we know that if we ever wanted to push content out, we could push it out through my profile. If we ever, had to grow significantly in the next 6 months, we're not in a position, fortunately, where we have to. We have very steady growth, but we've been able to really leverage that founder's brand with that. If I'm a small business owner, if I'm a small business in a specific location and I only sell to people in a specific location, I'd be looking at Facebook, I'd be doing certain zip codes, and I'd just be running content on a paid ads to that specific location, because it's going to be most likely relatively inexpensive on Facebook to target that. You can target by things like business page admins, people that are interested in certain demographics. Doesn't necessarily have to be set job titles, but you could produce that content and just have a new video come out every single month and just make sure that everybody's seeing it at least 2 or 3 times a month. That's a very easy, inexpensive way of launching a campaign and starting off with. The struggle that a lot of companies face is they try and bring people into their pipeline too early. When they're ready to buy, they will reach out to you. Stop trying to get them in too early. I know as a sales rep, that's like unheard of, to not follow up with people and not go after people. They've downloaded a white paper, so you want to go after them. But the fact is, they're not ready to buy. And as a sales rep, you're going to waste your time following up with them, because whether you follow up with them now, every week for the next 6 months, or you just produce content and then they come back to you in 6 months, it's still going to have the same effect. And that's where, again, if you remove that need to constantly be following up as a sales rep, you free up your time to produce content, to go and connect with your ICP on Facebook, to get into groups on Facebook, to connect on LinkedIn, and start to produce that content in a way that attracts people to you. And it's a much more effective way of social selling, basically, than just picking up the phone, smiling and dialing, enrolling in email sequences. And I've been there. I've been there as a sales rep. I've had orders to do this. And I remember that was a big reason why I got into marketing, was understanding that, hey, we can do this at scale without having to pick up the phones. Why are we focusing on just cold calling right now when we could be putting this message in front of people to be able to attract them to us, so that once they're ready to buy, we know we can have that conversation with them. So there's different techniques that I would say could be very, very effective with that. But it's taking those early steps to be able to do it. And it's very different for every business. Like I say, someone that sells in a specific location, Facebook's going to be far better than LinkedIn. Someone that sells to specific industries, LinkedIn's going to be far better just because of the level of targeting.
I love that. Great answer. Again, we're talking with Christopher Roche. You can find him on LinkedIn Connect. Sounds like he accepts a lot of connections there. Plus, find them at catalystconsulting.services. And I wanted to highlight just one thing that you said there, because we do sales training, and I think some salespeople are required to follow up on those leads. My tips for that, if you're gonna make calls, rather than making them cold, use these things as trigger events, but do it in a way that is not salesy here. So if somebody downloads your white paper, a simple call to say, did you get it? What were you hoping to find in there? Did it answer your question? Okay, great. Let me know when or if there's anything I could do to follow up. If you didn't get it or didn't answer your question, how can I help? I think that's great. You're not looking for the sale. You're not being pushy. And I think even on those other trigger events, and like you said, not just endlessly following up and making it like part of your task that you're beating your head against the wall and you're getting people telling you no all the time, is just reaching out. That nobody really does that anymore. That if you reach out in a way that says, hey, want to help, you can say never. If you got your question answered and it's fixed, I'll never follow up with you again. But if you wanted me to reach out, when would be a good time to circle back? Or should I put you on the list because you want more content like this? Or should I take you off the list so you don't get spammed from here on out? Those are really simple, I think, generous questions that allow you to engage in a conversation without getting beat up yourself or without beating up your prospects who are not ready. I think there are some ways to do that if you're in sales.
I think there's some very delicate ways to do that. And I would challenge, if you're a sales rep that's listening to this and that's something that you do, you try and follow up in more of a considerate and intentional way. Hey, did you call them? Hey, did you download it? Did you enjoy it? Did you get the value? Is there anything that I can help with? Basically, you're doing that on a one-to-one basis. If somebody downloads that ebook or that white paper and you go and connect with them on LinkedIn and they accept the request, which most people do, if you have if you have a decent profile, most people are going to accept that request that you send out to them, especially when they recognize the company name. If they found value in that blog article that is about this specific topic, why not post every couple of days on similar topics and provide value through your own profile rather than necessarily just through the company profile, and then be able to reach out and say, hey, I don't know if you saw this article that we just came out with. I know you enjoyed this blog article. I know you downloaded this. Would you be interested in checking this out? Or, hey, I'm going to be talking on this podcast, or we set up this webinar where we will be discussing this as a company. Feel free to hop in. It's just watch it online. It's a podcast. We have the snippets. Again, that's how you can take that piece of content and really turn it into value across the board for your clients, because by doing it on a one-to-one basis, it's so much follow-up associated with that. Whereas if you do this at scale, you have 500 people you connect with. Every time you post, they're getting that value out of the content over and over again.
I love that you said starting out with that connection request. I think that's great. People will accept that. If they don't, they're probably either not on the platform or they were not interested in the first place. They got their question answered. Second thing I wanted to highlight, I've seen one really cool tactic here that I haven't mentioned before yet, but it's something very new I've just noticed is setting up like an office hours where you could follow up with an email or a message to them and say, hey, saw you got the white paper, you're interested in this. I have regular office hours. If you need help, you can jump in to a Zoom call on Thursdays at 10 o'clock. If not, good luck to you and stuff here, but I'm available if you got questions now. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm imagining most people would not take you up on that, but somebody that does, you're going to have an interesting conversation. And it seems like a qualifying event there of not being pushy, but allowing people to opt into a sales call or more support on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once again, wanted to get to know you a little bit better here. We're talking with Christopher Roche. CatalystConsulting.services is the website. At this point in your career, how do you define success?
For me, success now is about finding that right balance of home life, work life, comfortability that I want to accomplish. Really, it's I've always, when I was younger, I always wanted to make X amount of money, and it was all very, I was very dollar driven when I was first starting my career. Now it's more about how do I maintain freedom whilst maintaining a certain lifestyle, and that to me is success. And I've been very fortunate with my career. I've exited 2 companies prior to this. I've been able to get to this point now where I consult and work with really interesting, explosive startups, and it's been a great position to get to. And I don't have this ambition to scale to 100 million a year. That's not something that's for me. It's more about how can I spend more time with my family, how can we travel more, how can we have that flexibility and ultimately be able to enjoy what you do so that it doesn't become a drain on you. And that to me is successful.
I love that. Was there a biggest failure or lesson learned along the way that you had to get over in order to be successful?
I think the first company I started was a SaaS company, and that was where I learned the importance of trying to avoid burnout. I was doing 120 hours a week, like just stupid numbers. I was 23 maybe when I was doing that. And it took its strain on me. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't staying as fit. I was working in a bar in the evenings trying to, make money for it. And, when you work in a bar, you have a beer after work. And then when you're working 6 days a week in a bar, you're having six or 12 beers, every week with that. So it adds up quickly. That was
I did the same thing. Yeah, I quit drinking like 6 months after I turned 21. It wasn't very long that was sustainable for me.
Yeah, but you're in that environment, and that for me, I learned that by being in that environment, it was not the best version of myself with that, and I wanted to be that best version. So when we got to the point where I was able to kind of successfully exit that company and join a different team, I was very, very cognitive of not working crazy hours. And then with that company, we were able to scale it very, very aggressively. And I was very careful of the number of hours that I worked with that and maintaining that balance. And now, with Catalyst, I have Friday afternoons are blocked off. You can't get a meeting with me then because I'm doing either deep work myself or I'm taking it off and spending time with my wife and, going in with family and things like that. So it's about having those boundaries. And I've learned every single company has definitely taught me a lot. And now I'm at a point where I feel very comfortable with my balance, the boundaries that I've set, and it is ultimately sustainable. And I consult with other marketing agency owners that are just starting or just kind of starting off in their field. And they, hey, we're available for clients 24/7. I said, why would you want to do that? Well, for us, it's a service that we offer. I said, that's not sustainable. It's like, well, 3 months in it is. Call me in 3 years. It's not like it's understanding that early on. It's a naivety about really not running your own business before, and that's something that I've learned, and now I feel very comfortable with the way that we handle our business, and we have a lot of mutual respect with our clients, and it really works well.
I think that's so great, and I totally agree. If you ruin your health, it's really hard to keep your business going after that. Last question: do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
Yeah, we talked about this before. Yeah, my favorite quote, which really is applicable to marketing, is to be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. It's a Warren Buffett quote, and it really refers to the stock market and investing and kind of the economy. However, with marketing, you see that same effect when what we've seen right now, everybody's shifted to Google Ads, everyone's panicking, pipelines are driving up. So let's shift to Google Ads and get that low-hanging fruit of people who are actively buying. But that means on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, there's this tremendous opportunity right now to create demand rather than capture demand. And that's where, we're having a ton of success with our clients right now, is by focusing on long-term goals, not this next quarter and how we're going to close as many deals as possible, because pipelines are drying up in the next couple of months.
Love that. All right, 3 quick ones. Recap for everybody. Tie this up in a nice big bow. Based on how to succeed at creating demand, what's one attitude you'd like people to have?
Looking at it with a long-term lens, long-term investment, not being afraid to fail with that, and understanding that the first piece of content you produce, it's going to be crap. I can tell you right now, because I've been doing this for a number of years, I still look back at first pieces of content and they're awful. And then you look back to now and, you will get better with it. It's like going to the gym. It's like any muscle, that creative content muscle. You've got to flex it. You've got to train it. And if you stick it out, it is truly a compounding effect that you'll have, and it will change the trajectory of either your sales pipeline, your career, or your company.
And one key behavior or action item you'd like people to do?
Post on LinkedIn. Go on LinkedIn. Go and connect with your ICP. Try posting. Try and do it for 30 days, 60 days. Post, 2 or 3 times a week. Post every day. Get to a point where you can start to feel comfortable with that, and just do something that's sustainable. One of the biggest issues people have is they try and, I'm going to post twice a day on LinkedIn or TikTok for the next year and a half, and after 14 days they forget to do it and they just stop. So finding a habit that is achievable over a 6-month window, that's the way you look at it. So set yourself up for success with that, and then once you accomplish that, then you can increase the frequency.
And the best technique, tool, or hack to use?
I would say the best tool for creating demand right now is again LinkedIn. I feel like I'm just preaching LinkedIn at this point. But yeah, that's a great one. And then a video editing software tool that we use is Descript, which will do all your subtitles. It's phenomenal. It takes 10 minutes to edit a video on it compared to what was taking a long time. So that's another hack that you can use. And then go and find, Sales Navigator on LinkedIn. Go and find people in your ICP. Find who you want to sell to, connect with them, and just add value.
I wrote a book on LinkedIn for LinkedIn and Sandler, so no problem there. Shamelessly plugging them. I appreciate you being on the show. Again, Christopher Roche, you can find him on LinkedIn, or you can go to catalystconsulting.services. If you're looking for more information on Sandler, we are the world's largest sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. You can find us at sandler.com. Click on find a training location. You can reach out to our enterprise group if you got more than one location, or you can send this podcast to somebody that you think needs to hear it. Maybe a boss or an employee or just somebody looking to do better in their own small business and career. We appreciate you listening. Remember, whatever you are, be a good one. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe to get notified about future sales and leadership videos from Sandler.
The Sandler Summit returns in 2023. Each new event builds exponentially upon the energy and success of the prior year. The 2022 Sandler Summit event was a huge success for everyone who attended, so don't miss the next one. Buy your tickets to the Sandler Summit at sandler.com/summit.